Welcome to Darkverse, where the shadows of the past and present collide, and the mysteries that haunt our world are brought to light. I'm your guide through these unsettling tales, Isaac Nightshade, a seeker of truth in the darkest corners of reality. Tonight, I'm about to take you on a journey through stories that will chill your bones and linger long after you've heard the last word. These are not just stories. They are real-life mysteries that have remained unsolved, chilling, and waiting for their time to be told. From the inexplicable disappearances to the tragic events that still echo through the corridors of time, you'll hear tales that will make you question everything you thought you knew. So settle in, turn off the lights, and prepare to step into the unknown. If you find yourself gripped by the eerie and the unexplained, I invite you to subscribe and join me in the Darkverse. Let the haunting begin. Story 1. The disappearance of Tara Calico location. Belen, New Mexico. Person, Tara Calico. It was a crisp autumn morning in 1988 when Tara Calico, a 19-year-old college student, set off for a morning bike ride. Tara had always been an active, independent young woman, and that day was no different. She had been living with her mother in Belen, New Mexico, a small, quiet town where people didn't often worry about the dangers of the world beyond. With her father passing away when she was young, Tara had grown accustomed to navigating the world on her own, and on that day, her only concern was getting a good ride in before returning to her busy life. It was September 20th, 1988, when she set out on her bike. The sun had barely risen, and the sky was still a pale shade of blue, with soft clouds drifting across the horizon. Tara had a plan to ride around a nearby area, looping back to her home before lunchtime. As she rode, she passed familiar sights, the quiet neighborhoods, the dusty roads, the soft sounds of morning life stirring, but Tara would never make it back. At approximately 9:30 a.m., Tara's mother, Patty, heard the sounds of a bike outside and assumed Tara was close to home. But when an hour passed without her daughter returning, Patty began to worry. Hours turned into a day, and still no sign of Tara. Patty contacted local authorities and even drove up and down the roads Tara might have taken, but there was no trace of her. The search for Tara Calico began immediately. Local police, volunteers, and even the FBI were called in to investigate. They retraced her route, but there were no witnesses. No one had seen her after the last confirmed sighting at the intersection of Route 47. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Days turned to weeks, and still, no new evidence surfaced. The community was shaken. Tara was known as a friendly and responsible young woman, and her sudden disappearance was completely out of character. There were no signs of foul play, no ransom note, nothing to indicate why she had disappeared. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. As time went on, the police turned to the theory that Tara had been kidnapped. The case grew colder, and with no leads or suspects, the investigation eventually stalled. But what happened next would add a disturbing twist to the case. The Polaroid. 2 years later, a photograph surfaced that would forever change the course of Tara Calico's case. It wasn't a photograph of Tara herself, but rather a disturbing image found in a convenience store in Florida. A man was flipping through the photos, looking for a snapshot to buy when he came across a Polaroid photo that made his blood run cold. The photograph showed a young woman, gagged and bound, sitting next to a man who appeared to be in his 40s. The woman's features were obscured by a deep shadow, but her clothing, a white shirt with a design that resembled the one Tara had been wearing on the day she disappeared, was unmistakable. Behind them, a room with cracked walls and a faint, dim light in the background. The picture was taken somewhere that resembled a basement or abandoned building. The man who found the photo didn't think much of it until he showed it to his wife, who immediately made the connection. The woman in the photo looked eerily like Tara Calico. Desperate to find answers, the man contacted Tara's family and sent them the image. The photo was forwarded to the police, and Tara's mother, Patty, immediately recognized the girl's face. It was her daughter. There was no doubt. She knew that the face staring back at her from that Polaroid was Tara, and the agony of not knowing what had happened to her only intensified. But how could a photo of her daughter appear in Florida when she had gone missing in New Mexico? How did the picture come to be? The case was reopened, and theories began to swirl. Was Tara still alive? Had she been held captive somewhere for years? Who was the man in the photo? These questions plagued investigators, but the Polaroid was the only real clue in the case. Despite several attempts to trace the origin of the photo, no answers came. Theories and speculations over the years, many speculated about the true fate of Tara Calico. Some believed that the man in the photograph might have been the one who had abducted her. Others thought the Polaroid was a twisted piece of evidence left by someone who wanted to torment Tara's family. However, the most chilling theory was the possibility that the man in the photo was involved in a more extensive network of kidnappers. In the years since Tara disappeared, various other missing persons cases have surfaced with similar circumstances, leading some investigators to wonder if Tara's abduction was just one case in a series of unsolved disappearances. The eerie similarity between the Polaroid and the circumstances surrounding Tara's vanishing raised even more questions. Had Tara somehow escaped captivity only to end up in the hands of another captor? Or had the photo been staged? Theories also circulated about possible local connections to Tara's disappearance. There were whispers of a man in the town who had been acting suspiciously in the days leading up to Tara's disappearance, though nothing ever came of the lead. However, many believed that the town's close-knit nature made it easy for someone to cover up a crime or avoid detection. Despite years of investigations and even attempts to use modern forensic technology, Tara's case has never been solved. The Polaroid remains one of the most haunting pieces of evidence. Some believe it was a message, a clue from the kidnapper himself, while others believe it was a cruel hoax. The impact. The disappearance of Tara Calico has left a lasting scar on her family in the small town of Belen, New Mexico. For Patty, Tara's mother, the torment of not knowing what happened to her daughter is unbearable. Despite countless interviews, searches, and even media exposure, no one has ever come forward with definitive information. Over the years, Patty's health has deteriorated, and her grief only deepened as the years passed without answers. As for the rest of the Calico family, the pain of losing Tara continues to haunt them. Her case remains unsolved, and every lead turns up cold. Every attempt to find closure for Tara's family seems to end in more questions. Today, Tara Calico's case is still an open investigation. The photo that haunted her family continues to spark questions and theories, but the mystery remains as puzzling as ever. Was the woman in the photo truly Tara, or was it just another cruel twist of fate? Could Tara still be alive, or was she taken somewhere far away, never to be seen again? To this day, the story of Tara Calico remains one of the most chilling, unsolved disappearances in modern history. The photo of the woman in the Polaroid, staring back at the viewer with a silent scream, continues to torment her family. Each unanswered question brings more despair, and for those who are left to wonder what truly happened, the search for the truth endures. Story 2. The Bell Witch Cave Location. Adams, Tennessee. Person, John Bell and the Bell family. The story of the Bell Witch haunting is one of the oldest, most terrifying and well-known legends in American folklore. It has haunted generations, the eerie tales passed down for centuries, about a family and a force they couldn't understand or escape. The events that took place in the early 19th century on the Bell family farm in rural Tennessee would change the lives of its inhabitants, and those who heard their tale, forever. The Bell family moved to the area near Adams, Tennessee, in 1804, settling on a peaceful farm. John Bell, the father, was an upstanding man, well respected in his community. His wife, Lucy Bell, was loving and devoted, raising their children with care and attention. The Bell family's life seemed typical, perhaps even idyllic for the time, until one fateful day in 1817. That was when strange occurrences began to plague the Bell family. It started with an eerie, unexplainable sound. At first, John Bell thought it was just the wind or a strange animal. But when the noise continued every night, it became more unnerving. The sound was described as scratching, knocking, and banging noises coming from the walls and ceilings of their farmhouse. It wasn't long before the Bell family began to notice other unsettling things. Mysterious tapping, scratching, and whispering voices filled the house at night, causing their nerves to fray. At first, the family kept quiet, hoping the strange occurrences would pass. But the noises grew louder, and soon they couldn't ignore it any longer. When the haunting started to intensify, John Bell reached out to his neighbors, and they too heard the unexplainable sounds emanating from the Bell farm. Soon it became clear this was no ordinary haunting. The witch's voice. As the family tried to figure out the source of the noises, they were stunned when the spirit revealed itself. The Bell family began to hear a voice, a low, gravelly voice at first unintelligible. The voice began to identify itself as Kate, and it claimed to be the spirit of a woman who had lived in the area years before the Bells had moved in. The voice began to communicate with the Bell family, speaking with them as though it were a living person. It was as though the house had been possessed by this unseen force. The spirit, calling itself Kate, seemed to take particular interest in John Bell, tormenting him relentlessly. At night, the voice would yell and scream at him, sometimes insulting him or accusing him of wrongdoing, while other times it would simply berate him. It wasn't long before Kate started to do more than just speak. The Bell family would wake to find their bedclothes torn and thrown about. At one point, it was said that John Bell himself was physically attacked, his hair pulled, his face slapped, and his body struck by unseen forces. But it didn't stop there. Physical manifestations and the tormenting spirit. As the days and nights wore on, the Bell family began to experience more violent interactions with the spirit. The family dog, once a loyal protector of the Bell farm, was found dead, mysteriously poisoned. Then the eldest daughter, Elizabeth, was slapped and scratched in the middle of the night. Objects were hurled across the room by invisible hands, and strange marks would appear on the children's bodies. Kate seemed to be most drawn to John Bell. His torment escalated to such a degree that he began to suffer from severe exhaustion, dizziness, and nausea. His health deteriorated rapidly, and many began to fear he wouldn't survive. The Bell family sought help from local spiritualists and mediums, but nothing could explain or stop the torment they were experiencing. No one could remove the entity from their home. The disturbing nature of these events was well known throughout the local community. Neighbors began to visit the Bell farm to witness the haunting firsthand, and many left in disbelief, confirming that something was terribly wrong. Local ministers were called in to perform exorcisms, but the spirit remained, only growing more powerful. It was during these visits that the Bell Witch gained notoriety. People came from miles away to experience the paranormal activity and to learn more about this elusive spirit, but despite their efforts, the Bell Witch was relentless. The final days of John Bell. By 1820, John Bell's health had severely declined. The torment continued relentlessly, and his suffering became unbearable. He had been unable to sleep, and he was in constant pain, something that his family and friends couldn't explain. Eventually, John Bell became bedridden, and on December 20th, 1820, he passed away. However, the mystery didn't end there. After John's death, the Bell Witch claimed responsibility for his demise. The spirit said that it had poisoned John Bell and that it had been the one to cause his suffering. No one could confirm or deny this claim, but the Bell family had little doubt that something truly supernatural had been tormenting them for years. The aftermath and the legacy. Following John Bell's death, the haunting reportedly subsided, but Kate's presence was still felt in the area for some time. The Bell family, though, scarred by their experiences, tried to continue with their lives. The family sold the farm, and the area became a site of interest for paranormal researchers and the curious alike. The Bell Witch's legend has endured, with many believing that the cave near the Bell family's farm, the so-called Bell Witch Cave, is where the spirit continues to dwell. Many have ventured into the cave, claiming to experience strange phenomena, strange voices, and cold spots. Some even say that the spirit of Kate still roams the land, tormenting those who are brave enough to enter her domain. The story of the Bell Witch remains one of the most chilling and enduring legends in American history. To this day, the Bell Witch Cave stands as a reminder of the terrifying events that occurred in the early 1800s in Adams, Tennessee. People from around the world continue to visit the site, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spirit that tormented the Bell family and left its mark on the history of the supernatural. Cover conclusion, a warning from the witch. The Bell Witch haunting is not just a story, it's a part of American folklore that has gripped the imagination of people for generations. The terrifying entity, which tormented a seemingly ordinary family, is one of the few hauntings that have been witnessed by multiple people, including family, neighbors, and strangers alike. Whether or not you believe in the supernatural, there's something unsettling about the Bell Witch story. Perhaps it's the fact that no one truly knows the extent of the terror that John Bell and his family suffered. Or perhaps it's the idea that the spirit of Kate still lingers, waiting to claim more victims. The Bell Witch haunting serves as a chilling reminder. Some spirits do not rest. They linger in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known. And sometimes, no matter how much you try to resist, the spirits of the past are never truly gone. Story 3. The Haunting of the Myrtles. Plantation location: St. Francisville, Louisiana. Person Chloe, a slave. The Woodruff family, the Broyne family. Nestled deep in the heart of Louisiana, just outside the quiet town of St. Francisville, sits a beautiful yet chilling plantation known as the Myrtles Plantation. What seems like a peaceful, picturesque estate, surrounded by lush gardens and centuries-old oak trees, is hiding a sinister and tragic history. For centuries, the plantation has been the site of countless ghost stories, paranormal sightings, and whispers of tragedy, many of which continue to haunt the halls of this historic mansion. The Myrtles Plantation, now a bed and breakfast, was originally built in 1796 by a wealthy man named General David Bradford, a lawyer and Revolutionary War soldier. However, it wasn't the plantation's grand beginnings that would make it infamous. It was the series of events that unfolded within its walls, and the tragic history that has left it marked as one of the most haunted places in America. It is said that the haunting began when the Woodruff family moved into the plantation in the 1800s. But the story truly took shape with the involvement of a young slave woman named Chloe. The tragic story of Chloe was a slave who worked at the plantation during the time of the Woodruff family. She was a beautiful young woman who had caught the eye of the plantation owner, Clark Woodruff. As with many other cases of slavery during this period, Chloe's life was marked by abuse, exploitation, and powerlessness. Despite her feelings toward Clark, she became entangled in a complicated, manipulative relationship with him, which would ultimately lead to her tragic fate. Chloe was a house slave, responsible for tasks like cooking and serving meals to the family. She worked closely with the Woodruff family and often found herself alone with Clark, who was said to have taken advantage of her. According to some versions of the story, Chloe fell in love with him, and when she became pregnant, he began to neglect her, likely to avoid the shame and scandal that would come from such an affair. Heartbroken and desperate to maintain his favor, Chloe sought the advice of an older slave, and she was told to use herbs to make a tea to induce an abortion. Chloe, in her desperation, tried to use these herbs to keep Clark's interest, but instead she unknowingly poisoned the Woodruff family's dinner. She had slipped a deadly dose of poison into a birthday cake, intending to harm only Clark. But tragedy struck when Clark's wife, Sarah, and two of their children consumed the poisoned cake instead. The effects of the poison were immediate and fatal. Sarah and the children died painfully, and Chloe's life was forever changed. The Woodruff family, enraged and devastated, had no mercy. Chloe was allegedly caught and punished for her crime. As punishment for her actions, it's believed that she was hanged by the family or by other slaves on the estate, though some versions of the story suggest that she was either sold off or left to die in the woods. Whether or not Chloe truly caused the deaths of the Woodruff family members remains a subject of debate, but what is undeniable is that her actions left a curse on the plantation that still lingers to this day. The haunting begins after Chloe's death. It didn't take long for the spirits of the plantation to make themselves known. The first recorded instance of ghostly activity was said to occur when the Woodruff family moved away from the plantation and new occupants arrived. The new owners, the Broyne family, began experiencing strange happenings almost immediately. The most chilling of these events involved the ghost of Chloe herself. It is said that she began appearing in the plantation house, her figure sometimes visible in the upper windows or near the main staircase. On one occasion, visitors reported hearing the sound of footsteps walking through the house in the middle of the night. When they followed the sound, they would find no one. As the years passed, the sightings continued, but they were not confined to Chloe's figure. Other strange and disturbing occurrences began to surface. Guests and staff members alike would hear voices, soft whispers calling their names, or strange, unintelligible mutterings coming from rooms that were believed to be unoccupied. Furniture would move on its own, and cold drafts would swirl through rooms, even when the air outside was still. One of the most well-known accounts of the haunting came in the 20th century, when a guest visiting the plantation during a stay had a disturbing encounter with the ghostly figures. She reported seeing the face of a woman with glowing, spectral eyes appearing outside her window. The woman's expression was described as both sorrowful and menacing, a feature that many who visited the plantation have attested to seeing over the years. The plantation staff and guests also reported sightings of children's laughter and the sounds of toys being played with in the hallways. At times, it seemed as though there were ghostly figures walking about the estate, their translucent forms barely visible in the moonlight. Some of the most eerie accounts came from guests who were awakened in the middle of the night by strange, pressing sensations, as if something or someone was sitting on their chest. According to the Bell Witch, while many people have heard of the Bell Witch haunting in Tennessee, some claim that the Myrtles Plantation has its own connection to the famous Bell Witch. The Bell Witch, known for terrorizing a family in the 19th century, was said to be a spirit that took on a variety of forms, including that of an old woman. The theory was that Chloe, in her quest for revenge and anger, had become a manifestation of the Bell Witch herself. Others, however, believe Chloe's spirit is bound to the plantation, unable to rest after her tragic fate. She was said to torment both her descendants and the living, reminding them of the cruelty and injustice she had suffered. One of the more infamous hauntings reported at Myrtles Plantation took place in the Myrtles Plantation's mirror. The large antique mirror in the main hallway of the plantation house is said to reflect the spirits of the deceased. Some guests have claimed that the mirror shows shadows, figures, or even faces that seem to be watching them. There have been reports of a child's face appearing in the reflection, suggesting that the souls of the Woodruff children may still be trapped within the house. The Curse of the Plantation. The haunting at the Myrtles Plantation is said to have never ended. Over the years, paranormal investigators, tourists, and even skeptics have ventured to the estate to try to understand what happened, and to see for themselves the restless spirits of the plantation. Some visitors have come away with photographs of unexplained figures, while others have had personal experiences, feeling cold hands brush against their skin, hearing disembodied voices, or witnessing strange lights flickering in the windows. The stories of Chloe's vengeful spirit continue to resonate in the hearts of many, and the curse of the Myrtles Plantation lives on. The plantation is now open to the public, offering tours and overnight stays. However, many who have dared to stay overnight claim that they can feel the weight of the plantation's dark history, pressing down on them, making it impossible to ignore the spirits of the past. The legacy. Though the Myrtles Plantation has become a popular destination for paranormal tourism, it remains an ominous place, haunted by the tragic events that unfolded there over 2 centuries ago. Some believe that Chloe's spirit is still lingering, seeking forgiveness for her actions or revenge for the injustices she faced. Others believe the spirits of the Woodruff family still roam the estate, trapped in a cycle of sorrow and anger. The Myrtles Plantation's dark past serves as a reminder that some places are forever marked by tragedy, and some ghosts can never rest. Story 4. The murder of the Villisca Axe family location. Villisca, Iowa. Person, the Moore family. The Stillinger sisters. Villisca, Iowa, is a small, peaceful town that has long been known for its quiet charm and rural beauty. However, for those who know the town's darkest secret, Villisca is forever tied to a horrific, unsolved murder that has haunted its residents for over a century. The Villisca Axe murders remain one of the most chilling and perplexing unsolved crimes in American history, a case shrouded in mystery, suspicion, and terror. On the night of June 9th, 1912, the Moore family, Father Josiah Moore, Mother Sarah Moore, and their 4 children, Herman, Mary, Arnie, and Paul, were brutally murdered in their home. But the tragedy didn't stop there. 2 young sisters, Ina and Lena Stillinger, who had been sleeping over at the Moore house, were also killed that night. All 6 victims were bludgeoned to death with an axe while they slept, their lives snuffed out in a violent and terrifying manner. The events of that night have become a tragic piece of Villisca's history, but what makes the case even more chilling is that it has never been solved. The identity of the killer remains unknown, and despite decades of investigation, the killer, or killers, were never brought to justice. Even more unsettling, those who have investigated the crime scene over the years have reported strange occurrences, making Villisca one of the most haunted places in Iowa. The discovery of the bodies. The horror began when the Moore family failed to attend church the morning after the murders. Josiah Moore was a prominent member of the community, a well-respected businessman, and a deacon at the local Presbyterian church. When he and his family didn't show up, members of the congregation grew concerned. Afterward, neighbors went to the Moore house to check on them, fearing something was wrong. When they arrived at the house, they discovered the gruesome scene inside. The front door was locked and the windows were covered, but the smell of death lingered in the air. The bodies of Josiah and Sarah Moore were discovered in their bed, their faces obscured by bloodstains. Their children were found in the same room, lying in pools of blood. In the back bedroom, the Stillinger sisters, Ina and Lena, were found murdered in a similar fashion. The weapon used to kill the family was an axe, which had been left behind at the scene. Strangely, the killer had taken great care to ensure that no one would hear the murders. All the victims were struck while they were asleep, and the killer had moved quietly throughout the house. There was no sign of a struggle, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. As the investigation began, it was revealed that the killer had stayed in the house for hours after the murders, calmly covering the mirrors with sheets and cleaning the axe. This suggested that the killer had taken their time, unhurried, and perhaps even savoring the act of murder. The crime was horrific, and the brutality of it left the townspeople horrified and confused. When the investigation and theories. The initial investigation pointed to several suspects, though no one was ever arrested for the murders. One of the main theories was that the killer was someone from within the town, a person who knew the Moore family and their daily routines. However, despite intense scrutiny and questioning, no concrete evidence linked anyone in the town to the crime. A few days after the murders, a suspect was briefly considered. Frank Jones, a local businessman and political rival of Josiah Moore. Frank had reportedly been having a dispute with Josiah over the ownership of a farm, and some thought he might have had a motive for the killings. However, no evidence was found to connect Frank Jones to the murders, and he was eventually cleared as a suspect. Other theories involved the possibility of an outsider, someone who had traveled through the town and committed the murders while the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters slept. One particularly unsettling possibility was the theory that the killer might have been a serial killer who was on the move, committing similar murders in other locations. However, no other killings of a similar nature were ever found in the area. Despite these theories, the Villisca Axe murders case grew cold. The police had no solid leads, and the killer, or killers, remained elusive. Over the years, the case became a subject of intrigue for amateur sleuths, paranormal investigators, and historians. Many questions remained unanswered. Why was the Moore family targeted? Why were the Stillinger sisters, who had been at the Moore house for a sleepover, murdered as well? What motivated such a brutal and senseless crime? The haunted house and paranormal activity. As if the grisly murders weren't enough, the Villisca Axe murder house itself has become infamous for the paranormal activity that has occurred within its walls. Over the years, many people who have visited the house have reported disturbing and unexplained phenomena. The house is now open to the public for tours, and many guests have claimed to experience strange occurrences during their visit. One of the most commonly Reported experiences is the feeling of being watched. Visitors often report feeling a cold, oppressive atmosphere in certain rooms, particularly the bedroom where the Moore family was found. Some guests have even claimed to see shadowy figures moving throughout the house, and others have heard eerie noises such as footsteps or whispers, even when they were alone in the building. In addition to these spooky experiences, some guests have claimed to see apparitions of the victims, especially the Moore children. These apparitions are said to appear as fleeting images in the corners of the rooms, vanishing just as quickly as they are seen. Others report hearing the sounds of children playing or laughing in the distance, only to find no one there when they investigate. Perhaps the most chilling experience reported by visitors is the sense of dread that pervades the house. Many describe a feeling of heavy sadness and unease, as though the spirits of the murdered family are still trapped within the house. This sense of sorrow is said to be especially palpable in the children's bedroom, where the Moore children and the Stillinger sisters were murdered. Some have even claimed to feel a cold hand touch them or a sudden, inexplicable pressure on their chest. Theories on the paranormal activity. Some paranormal investigators believe that the lingering spirits of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters have never left the house, and that they continue to haunt the wider property in an attempt to find peace. The brutal nature of their deaths, combined with the fact that the case was never solved, has led many to believe that the spirits of the victims are trapped in a state of unrest. Others believe that the entity haunting the house might not be the victims themselves, but the ghost of the killer. Some theories suggest that the killer's dark energy might still linger in the house, causing the disturbing phenomena experienced by those who enter. The fact that the murderer took such care to cover the mirrors and clean the axe, even staying in the house for hours after the killings, hints at an eerie connection to the space itself. Perhaps the house is where the killer felt most comfortable, and now the space is cursed with their malevolent presence. Conclusion: the Villisca Axe murders case is one of the most notorious unsolved crimes in American history. The brutal murders of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters, followed by the eerie events in the house, have made Villisca a chilling location in the world of true crime and the paranormal. The story of the Villisca Axe murders continues to captivate the imagination of people from around the world, and it remains an open wound in the town's history. Despite the passage of over a century, the questions surrounding the killings remain as unanswered as ever. Who committed such a horrific crime, and why? Is the Villisca Axe murder house truly haunted, as many believe, or is it simply the site of a tragic history that refuses to fade into the past? The mystery endures, and with it, the restless spirits of the past seem to linger, waiting, watching, and reminding the world of the darkness that once visited Villisca. Story 5. The Ghost of the Queen Mary Location. Long Beach, California. Person: the crew of the Queen Mary, passengers, and the spirits of the ship's past. The Queen Mary, a retired British ocean liner now docked permanently in Long Beach, California, is as majestic as it is mysterious. This massive vessel, once the pride of the British Cunard Line, served as a luxurious passenger ship during its heyday, ferrying the elite across the Atlantic Ocean. But beyond the stories of grandeur and royal travelers, the Queen Mary has a much darker, more ominous side, a side tied to the ship's wartime service, its eerie hauntings, and the tragic deaths that occurred aboard her. The Queen Mary, after being launched in 1936, was primarily known for its elegance, speed, and luxurious accommodations. However, during World War II, she was transformed into a troop carrier, called the Grey Ghost, due to her camouflage and ability to outpace German U-boats. She transported thousands of soldiers and was involved in countless harrowing voyages across the seas. But this service was not without its toll. The ship's history is marked by multiple tragic events, accidents, suicides, and even deaths in battle. It's these events, some believe, that have left a lingering imprint on the ship's hulls, turning it into one of the most haunted places in the world. The haunted ship. The Queen Mary has been docked in Long Beach since 1967, and since then, it has become a popular tourist attraction, hotel, and restaurant. But it's also been a haven for paranormal activity. Over the years, numerous reports have surfaced from guests, crew members, and paranormal investigators about strange occurrences on board the ship. Most commonly, people report cold spots, unexplainable noises, and sightings of ghostly apparitions. Perhaps the most famous ghost aboard the Queen Mary is that of John Petter, a crew member who tragically lost his life in 1966. Petter was working in the engine room when a watertight door unexpectedly slammed shut, trapping him between the door and the bulkhead. He died instantly, and his ghost is said to haunt the area where he died. Many visitors to the Queen Mary report hearing footsteps in the engine room and seeing strange lights flicker in the area, particularly near the door where Petter met his untimely end. Another well-known ghost is that of a young woman named Sarah, who is said to haunt the ship's stateroom B340. The room, which is a suite, was once rented by several different passengers over the years. But strange occurrences began to happen frequently. Items would go missing, and many guests claimed to feel a strange presence in the room. One of the most chilling reports came from a hotel, guests who described waking up to the feeling of being touched by an unseen hand during the night. Guests would also report hearing knocking from the inside of the walls, and some claimed to hear strange whispers calling their names. The Haunted Stateroom, B340. Stateroom B340 has been the site of numerous paranormal investigations, and it has gained quite the reputation for its sinister atmosphere. According to reports, guests staying in B340 often find themselves awakened in the middle of the night by sounds of rattling furniture, creaking floorboards, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. In one particularly eerie incident, a guest woke up to find that their bed was shaking violently, even though there was no obvious cause for the disturbance. Upon leaving the room and returning to the front desk to complain, the staff informed them that they were not the first to have a strange experience in B340. One previous guest reported hearing the sound of a woman crying in the room. When they went to investigate, they saw nothing, but they were left with a lingering sense of dread. B340 was eventually sealed off to the public for several years due to the increasing number of supernatural reports. However, it was reopened later for paranormal tours, where guests can experience the chilling atmosphere for themselves. Other haunting incidents. Aside from these two main spirits, there are several other unexplained phenomena aboard the Queen Mary. The most disturbing of these occurrences is the disembodied voices that are heard throughout the ship. Over the years, crew members and visitors alike have reported hearing eerie whispers, screams, and even conversations from rooms that are otherwise unoccupied. Some have even claimed to hear loud banging noises coming from below decks, though no one has ever been able to identify the source. Another common occurrence is the presence of shadowy figures seen walking the halls, particularly near the ship's former dining rooms. Some guests claim to have seen shadowy, humanoid forms standing just out of reach in dimly lit areas, only to disappear when approached. One popular theory is that these shadows may be the spirits of former crew members who worked aboard the ship during her active years, including the wartime years when so many soldiers died during transport. But it's not just the crew members who are said to haunt the ship. Many guests have reported the feeling of being watched during their stay, and several people have described hearing the sounds of children playing, only to discover that the ship is empty. These eerie sounds have been especially common in the ship's first-class promenade, which has been described as one of the most haunted locations on board. Paranormal investigations. The Queen Mary is not just a popular destination for tourists, it's also a prime location for paranormal investigators. The ship has been featured in countless paranormal documentaries, including those on popular ghost hunting shows like Ghost Hunters and Destination Fear. In addition to the reports from regular visitors, professional ghost hunters have found ample evidence of paranormal activity, including electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, strange temperature fluctuations, and even photos of strange apparitions. In one investigation, a group of paranormal investigators was working in the ship's engine room, which is widely considered the most haunted part of the vessel. During their investigation, they captured an EVP of a voice saying, "Get out," when no one was present. The same group also experienced inexplicable drops in temperature, despite the fact that the ship's heating system was functioning normally. The group was also unable to explain the feeling of being touched by an unseen presence, a sensation that several team members reported during their investigation. The mystery of the Queen Mary's deaths. Many people who have stayed on the Queen Mary or visited her have reported a pervasive sense of doom, and some have suggested that the ship's violent past may be a factor in the supernatural events. The Queen Mary is known to have had a few mysterious deaths, particularly during her service as a troop carrier during World War II. Over 50 men died aboard the ship during wartime, including several who were killed in accidents or were struck down by disease. It is also rumored that the ship was involved in several untold tragedies that occurred behind closed doors. The haunting presence of these soldiers and the unresolved tragedies might explain why so many spirits are believed to still haunt the ship to this day. Conclusion: the Queen Mary's dark legacy. Today, the Queen Mary stands as a beautiful but chilling reminder of the past, with her eerie presence looming over Long Beach Harbor. She has been transformed into a floating museum, hotel, and restaurant, but the specters of her past still remain. For those brave enough to visit, the Queen Mary offers a haunting glimpse into a world where the spirits of the past refuse to fade away. Whether or not you believe in the supernatural, the Queen Mary's reputation as one of the most haunted ships in the world is undeniable. The chilling accounts of ghostly apparitions, strange noises, and unsettling occurrences continue to draw people to her, eager to witness the lingering spirits of the ship's tragic past. But be warned, once you step aboard, you may find that the spirits of the Queen Mary do not rest, and that their presence will follow you long after you leave. Story 6. The Tragedy of the Winchester Mystery House Location, San Jose, California. Person: Sarah Winchester, the spirits of the fallen. In the heart of San Jose, California, stands an architectural enigma, an enormous mansion filled with secrets, oddities, and eerie tales. Known as the Winchester Mystery House, this sprawling mansion is the result of one woman's obsessive quest to communicate with the dead, and its dark history, steeped in grief, superstition, and loss, has left it as one of the most haunted places in the United States. The story of the Winchester Mystery House begins in the late 1800s with Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company fortune. Sarah was a woman deeply affected by tragedy. She had suffered the loss of her infant daughter Annie, and later her husband. But it wasn't just the loss of her family that troubled Sarah. It was the persistent belief that the deaths were the result of a curse. After Sarah's husband passed away in 1881, she sought the advice of a spiritualist, a medium who allegedly told her that her family's wealth had been built on the blood of those who had fallen to the company's rifles. The medium warned Sarah that the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles were angry and seeking revenge. The medium suggested that Sarah should move west, build a house, and never stop constructing it, lest the spirits take her life as they had taken the lives of so many others. The start of construction. Taking the medium's words to heart, Sarah Winchester moved to California in 1884 and purchased an 8-room farmhouse in San Jose. The house was not much to look at in the beginning, but Sarah began to expand it immediately, with construction continuing day and night for 38 years, until her death in 1922. As she ordered her workers to build new rooms, stairways, and hallways, Sarah reportedly believed that the construction would appease the spirits of the dead. Some say she never stopped building because she thought that the spirits were whispering to her, guiding her to build certain features to ensure their peaceful passage. Others believe that Sarah's grief, combined with her belief in the supernatural, caused her to spiral into a state of obsession, causing her to make irrational decisions when it came to her home. The house grew to an unimaginable scale. Windows and doors opened into walls, stairs led to ceilings, and hallways stretched into rooms that went nowhere. In total, there were over 160 rooms added to the mansion, including 40 staircases, 47 fireplaces, and 13 bathrooms. The house was constructed in such an erratic and seemingly random manner that some rooms had doors opening directly into walls, while others contained staircases that led to nowhere. Many of the rooms are designed in a way that directly reflects Sarah's fixation with the number 13. For example, the mansion contains 13 paneled windows, 13 step staircases, and $1,300 bills for each piece of furniture in the house. In fact, the number 13 was one that Sarah believed to be powerful in warding off evil spirits. The strange and unexplained events over the years, stories began to emerge about the strange occurrences in the house. Some visitors reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease when walking through the halls of the mansion. The constant creaking of the floorboards, the flickering of lights, and the unexplained cold drafts only added to the strange atmosphere that seemed to haunt the house. But it wasn't just the house itself that was unnerving. Many people reported seeing strange, ghostly apparitions while inside. Staff members, tourists, and even paranormal investigators have claimed to see shadowy figures, hear whispers in empty rooms, or feel the presence of something unseen lurking behind them. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is the sound of footsteps, followed by the sight of a figure that vanishes into thin air. Among the most prominent spirits said to haunt the mansion is the ghost of Sarah Winchester herself. Many believe that Sarah, consumed by her obsession with the house and her belief in the spirit's wrath, remains trapped within the mansion's walls. Her spirit is said to appear in various parts of the house, particularly in the areas she spent the most time, such as her personal bedroom or the staircase that is said to have been one of her favorite spots. Visitors have reported seeing a figure dressed in Victorian clothing, walking silently down the hallways, only to vanish into a closed door or an empty room. The spirit room and other haunted areas. One of the most famous rooms in the Winchester Mystery House is known as the Spirit Room, located on the second floor. It's said that this room was specifically designed to serve as a place for Sarah to communicate with the spirits of the dead. The room is decorated with intricate carvings and symbols believed to be linked to spiritual practices, and it is one of the few places in the house that was meticulously designed rather than randomly constructed. Visitors have reported strange occurrences while inside the spirit room, including unexplainable cold spots, strange sounds, and even feelings of dizziness or nausea. Other areas of the mansion are similarly unsettling. The hallway of mirrors, where multiple mirrors are positioned across from one another, is another area that often causes visitors to feel disoriented. Some visitors have claimed that, as they passed through the hallway, they caught glimpses of figures standing just out of sight in the mirrors, figures that vanished when they turned around. In the basement, visitors have claimed to feel a strong sense of dread, often describing a suffocating, oppressive atmosphere. The basement is often regarded as one of the most haunted parts of the house, with numerous reports of strange noises, including the sounds of chains dragging across the floor or the unmistakable sound of someone walking behind them. The legacy of the Winchester Mystery House. Though Sarah Winchester passed away in 1922, her legacy and the legacy of her bizarre creation have lived on. The mansion, which was eventually opened to the public in the 1920s, has remained one of the most popular and haunted locations in California. People from around the world visit the mansion each year to experience its eerie atmosphere and to attempt to uncover the secrets of the spirits that are said to still reside within its walls. The house has inspired countless books, documentaries, and ghost hunting shows, which have only fueled the public's fascination with Sarah Winchester's eerie obsession. Some people believe that Sarah's relentless construction was a desperate attempt to ward off the spirits she thought were haunting her, while others believe that her paranoia drove her to madness, causing her to design a house that was completely disconnected from logic or reason. Conclusion: the haunted mansion that won't rest. The Winchester Mystery House is more than just a mansion. It's a place steeped in tragedy, obsession, and ghosts. The spirits of the past, including Sarah herself, are said to haunt the house, forever tied to the structure she created in a desperate attempt to escape the tragedy that marked her life. And while the mansion's physical structure may have been completed long ago, the supernatural mysteries that linger within its walls are far from over. For those brave enough to venture through its hallways, the Winchester Mystery House offers a glimpse into a world where the line between life and death is blurred, and where the spirits of the past still linger, never truly at rest. Story 7. The Disappearance of the Sodder Children. Location: Fayetteville, West Virginia. Person: the Sodder family. George, Jenny, and their 10 children. On Christmas Eve 1945, the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, was shaken to its core when a tragedy struck the Sodder family. George and Jenny Sodder, along with their 10 children, lived in a charming house in the rural hills of West Virginia. The night began like any other, with the family preparing for the holiday season. But by the morning of December 25th, their lives would change forever. The Sodder family home burned to the ground in the dead of night. What began as a typical Christmas Eve quickly escalated into a terrifying disaster. The fire destroyed their home, but shockingly, not all of the family members perished in the flames. 5 of the Sodder children were mysteriously absent from the scene of the fire, and despite extensive efforts to find them, they were never seen again. What began as a fire investigation soon turned into one of the most baffling and eerie disappearances in American history. Did the children perish in the fire, or was something far darker and more sinister at play? The Christmas Eve Fire. It was the night before Christmas, and the Sodder family was in the midst of holiday celebrations. George and Jenny had just finished dinner, and the children were eager to open their presents. All seemed normal, and the house was quiet as the family prepared to go to bed. George Sodder, a hard-working businessman, had made sure the family was ready for the festive season. But by midnight, everything changed. Around 1 a.m., the Sodder family awoke to the smell of smoke. A fire had started in the house, and it was spreading rapidly. The fire quickly engulfed the entire house, burning it to the ground. George and Jenny managed to escape with their 4 youngest children, but when they tried to rescue their older children, the flames were too intense. Despite their best efforts, 5 of the Sodder children were never found. In the aftermath of the fire, investigators claimed that the children's bodies had been burned beyond recognition. However, George and Jenny were convinced that their children had survived the fire. They found no remains of the children in the rubble, and they later found evidence suggesting that the fire had been intentionally set. The disappearance of the children. After the fire, George and Jenny Sodder were determined to uncover the truth behind the strange disappearance of their children. They refused to believe that their children had perished in the flames, especially since the fire had burned so intensely, yet there was no trace of their bodies. George, in particular, was suspicious of the way the fire had spread so quickly and the fact that the children's remains were never found. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case was that, despite the fire's ferocity, the bodies of the children were never found in the ashes. There was no sign of human remains, no bones, no clothing, just a charred, empty lot where the house once stood. Furthermore, the fire had burned the house from top to bottom, yet the children's bedrooms had not been completely destroyed, suggesting that something else might have been at play. George and Jenny sought answers. They even hired a private investigator to look into the case, and their investigation led them down a dark and twisted path. The more they uncovered, the more convinced they became that their children were still alive. They found evidence suggesting that the fire had been started intentionally, and they began to suspect foul play. The mysterious phone call. In the weeks following the fire, the Sodders received a strange and terrifying phone call. A woman on the other end of the line claimed to have seen the children after the fire. The woman said that she had seen the 5 missing children, unharmed, being driven away from the fire scene in a car. The woman's description of the children was accurate, and she provided details that only someone who knew them would have known. The Sodders were shocked and disturbed by this phone call. Could their children have survived the fire and been taken away? If so, who had taken them, and why? The phone call raised more questions than answers, but it also reignited their determination to find their children and uncover the truth behind their disappearance. The suspects. Is it a Kidnapping? Over the next few months, George and Jenny delved deeper into the mystery of their children's disappearance. They began to suspect that the fire may have been a cover-up for a kidnapping. There were several odd occurrences leading up to the fire that made the Sodders question whether someone had intentionally set the fire to abduct their children. In the days before the fire, George had noticed a few unusual things. He had received threatening phone calls, and some people had been asking strange questions about his family. One of the most notable incidents occurred when a man had appeared at George's office a few days before the fire, asking about his business and making cryptic statements about the children. George felt uneasy about the encounter but brushed it off at the time. Later, he would wonder if the man had been scouting the house, preparing for the night of the fire. Adding to the suspicion was the fact that the children had been sleeping in their rooms, unaware of the fire, which could suggest that they had been drugged or otherwise incapacitated. The fact that the fire had spread so quickly and destroyed the house in such a short amount of time raised even more questions. Why had the fire been so intense? And why had no one heard the children scream or cry for help? The investigation and the ongoing mystery. Despite their suspicions and the strange phone call, the investigation into the Sodder children's disappearance went cold. The official report concluded that the children had perished in the fire, though no remains were ever found. The case was closed, and the police moved on. However, George and Jenny refused to give up. They continued to search for their children, even putting up a reward for information about their whereabouts. They also appealed to the public for help, and for years they pursued every lead, hoping to find their children alive. In 1950, 5 years after the fire, the Sodders even received another disturbing letter. It was a photograph of a young man who appeared to resemble their missing son, Louis. The letter, which had no return address, claimed that the young man in the picture was their son and that he was alive and well. The Sodders were once again filled with hope, but despite their best efforts, they never found any proof that their children had survived. The ongoing legacy. Today, the case of the Sodder children remains one of the most perplexing disappearances in American history. The mystery surrounding their deaths and the strange events surrounding the fire continue to haunt Fayetteville, West Virginia. Despite decades of investigation, the truth behind the disappearance of the Sodder children has never been uncovered. The Sodder family story has become a chilling reminder of how easily things can go wrong and how some questions can go unanswered for a lifetime. The disappearance of the 5 Sodder children has sparked a number of theories, including the possibility of a kidnapping, an arson case gone awry, or something far more sinister. The Sodder family, forever haunted by their unanswered questions, continues to be a source of mystery and intrigue. Conclusion: the unsolved case. The case of the Sodder children remains unsolved to this day. The fire that destroyed the family's home and claimed the lives of 5 children was one of the most tragic and mysterious events in West Virginia history. Despite efforts by the Sodder family, police, and even private investigators, the truth about what happened that night remains elusive. The eerie phone calls, strange sightings, and unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation about what really happened. Could the children have been taken? Was it an act of revenge? Or was there a deeper, more sinister force at play? Whatever the answer may be, the story of the Sodder children is one that will remain etched in history, unsolved, and forever haunting. Story 8. The enigmatic disappearance of Dorothy Arnold. Location: New York City. New York person: Dorothy Arnold, the Arnold family, and various investigators. In 1910, New York City was bustling with life, its streets teeming with people, carriages, and the early days of an industrial revolution that was changing the world. Amidst this city of excitement and opportunity, a young woman named Dorothy Arnold disappeared without a trace. Her disappearance would remain one of the most baffling and chilling mysteries of the early 20th century. Dorothy Arnold, a 25-year-old socialite from an affluent New York family, was known for her beauty, charm, and intelligence. She had graduated from college with a degree in English literature, and her family had high hopes for her future. Dorothy was adored by her friends and admired for her sense of independence. But on the fateful day of December 12th, 1910, Dorothy simply vanished. The day of the disappearance, Dorothy's family last saw her, as she was about to leave their apartment on West 72nd Street, New York City, with the intention of doing some shopping and visiting a friend. She had mentioned to her family that she was going to buy a new dress and that she would return later that afternoon. But after she left their apartment, no one ever saw her again. Later that day, her family began to worry when Dorothy didn't return home. They waited until evening, but there was no sign of her. Fearing something had happened, Dorothy's parents, Francis and Sarah Arnold, contacted the police. The search for their daughter quickly began, and a massive investigation was launched. Police, family, and friends combed the streets of New York City in search of Dorothy, but there was no sign of her. In the days following Dorothy's disappearance, the Arnold family received several reports of possible sightings of her, but each lead proved to be fruitless. Dorothy was seen in various places around the city, at stores, on street corners, but each time the descriptions seemed inconsistent, and no one could provide solid evidence of where she had gone. The mysterious circumstances. What made Dorothy's disappearance particularly perplexing were the mysterious circumstances surrounding it. At the time of her vanishing, she was not in any apparent danger or distress. Her family described her as having no enemies and no reason to run away. She was not involved in any romantic relationships that would have caused her to leave in secret, and she had no history of depression or mental health issues. She was well liked by everyone who knew her, and there was no indication that anything was wrong. One of the most confusing details was that, although Dorothy was well known in New York, there were no immediate clues as to where she had gone. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation unfolds. After Dorothy's disappearance, the New York Police Department launched an extensive investigation, but there were no solid leads. The police questioned everyone who had come into contact with her, including store owners, cab drivers, and anyone who had seen her that day. However, nothing was definitive. Dorothy had left no clues behind, and her family couldn't understand why she would have disappeared voluntarily. As the investigation unfolded, various theories began to emerge. One popular theory was that Dorothy had been the victim of a kidnapping. Given her family's wealth, it was possible that someone had targeted her for ransom. However, no ransom note ever surfaced, and no one ever attempted to contact the family for money. Another theory suggested that Dorothy may have run away, either to escape a personal issue or because she had simply become overwhelmed by the pressures of society. But her family rejected this theory, insisting that she would never have left without telling them. A third, more unsettling theory was that Dorothy had met with foul play. Some speculated that she had been murdered during her trip to buy the dress, but there was no evidence to support such an assumption. No body was ever found, and no sign of violence was ever discovered. Some speculated that the police may have been too quick to dismiss this possibility, but there was nothing to suggest that Dorothy had been harmed. The role of the media. The media played a huge role in keeping Dorothy's disappearance in the public eye. Newspapers across the country printed stories about her vanishing, and her face became well known in the years that followed. Many readers were captivated by the mystery of a young woman disappearing so suddenly and without explanation. The story became one of New York City's most talked about mysteries. The Arnold family, in their grief and desperation, appealed to the public for help in finding Dorothy. They offered a reward for information, but no one came forward with anything concrete. The lack of any substantial leads made the investigation seem hopeless. Dorothy's case was eventually filed under missing persons, but it never really left the public consciousness. People continued to talk about her disappearance for years to come, but no one knew the truth. Her theories and speculation. Over the years, many theories have been proposed to explain Dorothy's disappearance. One theory is that she may have gotten lost or wandered into an area of the city where she became disoriented. Others suggest that she may have been abducted by someone she knew, though this has never been proven. Some believe she was targeted by a stalker, but no evidence has ever been found to support this. More sinister theories have suggested that Dorothy may have been the victim of a more organized crime. Given her family's wealth, it's possible that she had become a target for a criminal gang looking to extract ransom money. Some investigators even speculated that Dorothy may have been murdered to cover up a crime. Yet despite extensive research, no clear answers have ever been found. One intriguing possibility is that Dorothy had been involved in an illicit affair and that her disappearance was the result of a romantic entanglement gone wrong. Some suggest that she may have fled to escape an unwanted marriage or affair, but again, this is nothing more than speculation, as no one has ever found any evidence to support this. Theories of disappearance. The family drama. Another theory emerged when Dorothy's sister, who was much older than her, came forward with some information about family secrets. She suggested that Dorothy had been caught in a turbulent family dynamic and perhaps wanted to escape it all. Some believe that Dorothy may have been the victim of emotional or psychological pressure at home, but there's little evidence to confirm this theory. The ongoing mystery. Even now, over a century later, Dorothy Arnold's disappearance remains unsolved. Despite numerous investigations, countless theories, and widespread media coverage, the truth of what happened that day in 1910 remains elusive. Dorothy's case remains one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries of the early 20th century. Conclusion: the missing socialite. Dorothy Arnold's story is a haunting reminder of how quickly and mysteriously someone can vanish, leaving no trace behind. Was she the victim of foul play, or did she run away for reasons no one ever understood? Did she fall into the hands of someone who meant her harm, or did she slip away unnoticed into the vast, crowded streets of New York? To this day, the disappearance of Dorothy Arnold remains an unresolved puzzle, and her face still haunts the pages of unsolved mysteries. For Dorothy's family, the questions will never be answered, and the unknown will always linger in the cold, haunting streets of New York City.